let's just start by addressing a few queries which all of you are. Okay, so the panel, we need to. If you have any questions for any of the document.
Aparna, you want to talk about it? You can just talk about it for 2 minutes and then we can go.
Hi guys. So if I were to talk about this film that we've made, it's one of the biggest productions that history's done in recent times. It's also a very important story that we plan to tell through the documentary. It sort of goes beyond the politics. A lot of news channels already cover, the political side of things, whether it's rallies or agendas or, the various things. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to focus on the human story, which is basically the story of the people who organized the biggest logistical event in the world. What happened? You want me to stop? Oh. Which you will see now in the documentary. So it's sort of peppered with a lot of very sweet stories of people who go out there and vote, of people who have to travel through jungles, through mountains to actually set up a polling booth, so that very few people living in the smaller towns, the villages, can actually come out and vote. So that aspect of it, I feel, has come out very well in the documentary. Of course, we'd like to hear your views once it's sort of aired over here. You want me to keep talking? I don't want to tell them too much, let them see it first.
For example, I really love the story of Shani Devi in Himachal, or even Rihanna for that matter. So to discuss more about this particular film, which is in fact going live tomorrow at 9 PM on History TV 18, we have two special members from History TV 18 with us. First up, we have Avinash Kaul, who is the CEO of Network 18, Managing Director, TV 18 and AE Networks. Welcome. And along with that, we have Aparna Khera, who is the producer for this film. I mean, I have lots of questions to ask her from being a producer myself, the kind of research that went behind making this film, the kind of hard work, the months spent behind the entire research, how did they get all of this data and these individual cases that were shown in this particular film. Both of you, welcome again. And also, we have a Facebook Live with the audience joining us on the History TV 18 page, which you guys are aware of. Just starting in like a minute. Actually make democracy happen through elections. We have Avinash Kaul and the producer for this particular film, Aparna Khera, joining us on this Facebook Live today. I'm sure you guys must be having a lot of questions about this particular film. We have an audience with us who has already seen the film. I have already seen the film, so we'll take your questions one by one, but let us first begin with Avinash. Tell us, Avinash, how did India fit into the larger scheme of things for History TV 18?
Thanks, Shivani. See, if you look at it, history is about creating history is being created every day by everybody around us, and it gets recreated every single moment somebody tries to outdo something that the other person has already done. An exercise this mammoth, as I'm sure you've seen the numbers, 90 crore voters, 60 crore finally actually went down to vote. 1.4 crore people actually part of the process to go into more than 10,000 polling stations. This is the largest exercise. This is history getting created. And it gets created and it gets beaten every 5 years that there is an election in the largest democracy in the world. And History TV 18 stands true to that, in basically looking at contemporary history. And this is nothing but history, contemporary history in the making. And an exercise like this is obviously an eye-opener for most of the people in India as well. Because what we see at the end of the day is just the few minutes that we go into the polling booth, vote, and come back. But what we do not see is the process that goes behind it. And this show, we are hopeful, will travel the globe, not just in India, but across the world, and showcase the strength, the speed, the resilience, the entire logistics behind the largest exercise in democracy, which is the Indian elections. So we are hopeful that this attempt of ours will not just be showcased on History TV 18, and not only the news channels of Network 18, but also travel the world and demonstrate to the world what the size and scale of such an operation is really all about.
Aparna, my next question is to you. Avinash elaborated on, why did it make sense to to speak about the elections and what goes behind the scenes as we speak. What was the most fascinating thing about, the general elections in India that made you actually make a film and think about making a film around it?
Well, for me, obviously, it's the biggest election in the world. That in itself is reason enough to sort of make a film about it. What also worked really well for us were the human stories. We wanted to tell the story of people who are doing the work behind the scenes. The people who actually go out there, trek for 20 kilometers, reach a polling station, for a handful of villagers. That's the story we wanted to tell. We wanted to focus on the human aspect of it. Of course, the numbers are very big. Just the registered voters in our country are over 91 crores. So yes, it's a big exercise, but what also we wanted to sort of focus on was the human angle of it, which is all the people, the voters, the organizers, the security forces, so many people who were involved.
Being from Mumbai and being from a city, I think one of the most, one story that I could relate to is Aditya's story, because amongst us youth there is so much of political apathy. In fact, this year the voter turnout in Mumbai was the highest at 55.11% after, let's say, almost 3 decades where it was really high at 57% back in 1989. But still, when I went to the election booth, I had to stand for like 1.5 hours. I was scribbling about how it was summer afternoon, and I was scribbling about how hot it is and how difficult it is, and then I had to reach work, finish my assignments, etc. So I could really relate to that story. But Avinash, I would like to know from you, what is it about the film, or which case study did you really enjoy watching?
See, it's like Aparna was saying, it's the human stories, right? Because eventually, when you see the numbers, which is the first section of the film that you see, is just a staggering size of the numbers. And then you hear stories about, people working for 5 hours, people working in the small polling booth. But when you actually see it, it hits you, right? You see those people walking around those mountain paths, and literally when the sunlight is about to go out and they have to reach, and then the sheer logistics of, doing. Now, what motivates all of them? It's about all of those things, right? So it's not, that it's not the most expensive in that sense. It's just a sheer passion, what they want to do for the country. Go to those smaller booths, the old lady that you talked about, all of these are, the fascinating aspects of what it means to be participating in a democratic function in a country like this. So, those stories are actually very, very heartwarming because, in a city when you have a lot of polling booths around, you can easily go do things. There's a bit of an inconvenience, but look at the hardships that the people have in, far-flung areas. And that's what really warms a person's heart to see that, yes, the spirit is all intact and everything is good.
Yes, absolutely. At one end, the story of this lady from Himachal who's a 108-year-old Shari Devi. At the other end, we have Rihana's story. Then there is a story from Wayanad in Kerala that you narrated. Why did it make sense for you to also speak about the lives of Aditya and, put it against these stories of hardship and, how difficult it is to probably reach those polling booths and, conduct the election there?
Well, voters are everywhere. They belong to different regions, religions, age groups. First-time voters was a big segment this time. I think there were about 8.4 crores, which made us think that yes, there should be somebody featured, from that age group and somebody who's actually going out there and voting for the first time. In fact, the Election Commission, they released a number of videos to sort of encourage first-time voters to come and vote. To make them understand that, this is not just their right, it's their duty to come out and vote. So for us, it was an obvious choice to sort of feature somebody who was still contemplating whether they should vote, shouldn't vote. It's just that. Yeah.
Okay, from the looks of it, this looks like a film which, you've spent months doing research, collecting all the data. Avinash, how difficult was it to greenlight such a project?
Well, it's always, it's not an easy one, because logistics are significantly tougher, and when you see from the prism that at the end of the day, what you see is the output is about, under an hour at best. But it's more for the reasons of, history is priceless. That's the concept, right? And that's what makes it a little easier than most other things that we might want to do, because this is something which showcases the pride of the nation and it takes it across the entire globe, and this is that opportunity that we have. Before this, we had done a series on the surgical strikes, the recreations of the surgical strikes, which was again, a first in its entire genre of sorts. But these are moments when you feel really proud about, doing something which has a lasting value, right? Which is this till the next election comes, there's nothing to beat this. After that, and the next one will beat it, but that's a story for another time, right? But this is something that we'll really take pride in and we feel really happy about it. And honestly, greenlighting is not such a big challenge. It's just some stories need to be told, and this was one such story.
So we have a couple of questions from our audience who has joined in from Facebook. Also, the audience joining right now, you can send in your questions in the comment section on the Facebook Live. So first question is from Rajiv from Mumbai. Is the world's biggest election also the world's most expensive election? You might be knowing it since you worked very closely with the Election Commission on this one.
The Election Commission hasn't actually released those figures yet, so they're not available to us. But in what sense? Is it the kind of expenditure, is it their expenditure, or is it generally overall how much political parties spend?
So I would like to understand, I'm sure, he means this, how much money does Election Commission spend on conducting a general election?
So we've sort of given an estimate in the documentary. It's in the region of 3,000 crores is what they've estimated it to be. The final figure, I think, takes a few months, so we don't know for sure right now. But that's the region it will be in.
So is it the world's most expensive?
See, it's a very tough one, if I may step in for a moment. It's a really tough one to estimate because, you're talking about currencies differences, right? So we're talking about Indian rupees, and you might look at, there's a statistic in the film which is Delhi plus Mumbai is greater than Australia, right? So, but the dollar of Australia terms versus the rupee of India terms would be different. So, very, very tough to estimate these kinds of things. But on its own standard, I mean, 3,000 crores is not a small money at all. Considering 8,000 contestants on an average, so many parties, hundreds of parties in the thing, it is a fair amount of expenditure even by the political parties.
So we have more questions. There is Dhruv from Delhi writing in. How many years before the election do they start preparing for it? How many years before the election do they start preparing for the next general election?
Well, we started filming a few months before the election, but I'm sure they've been working for a long, long time. This is a question better answered by...
I wish Mr. Arora was here.
That would have been nice. So there is Tejas from Surat who's writing in. What was
In fact, if I may add to that, since the question already got phrased, is there is much talk about every year or every 6 months being some election or the other in the country.
In some state of
And so the machinery never slows down, right, at the election commission. It is always going on. There is some election or the other, always 3 months, 6 months away. And which is true even this year, when we have the Maharashtra state elections, we have Jharkhand, we have Haryana, So it just keeps going on.
Okay. So now there is Tejas from Surat who writes, what was the biggest challenge shooting this documentary? Which is my question also. What was your biggest challenge shooting this documentary?
Well, it was challenging, it was difficult because we had a team that was traveling with the polling officials and they did that whole 20-kilometer trek up to the village of Shakti. It was raining, you had to protect your equipment, you had to shoot at the same time. So that was challenging, plus those people had to walk 20 kilometers. These are all people who live in cities, they're not really used to it. So that was challenging. We also followed a team into the forests in Kerala, where they were setting up a polling station in Wayanad. So that again, I mean, yeah, these were the challenges, but I'm sure, I mean, it was great fun as well.
So, Avinash, I would like to know from you, why don't we see such documentaries in other genres?
Well, considering I wear two hats, one that of a news network, person managing a news network, and one managing a factual entertainment network, the thing is that, when you look at other genres, I mean, there is the mass entertainment. Now, mass entertainment is essentially serving a lot of fiction, and that's like really an assembly line fiction that you see. There are movie channels which cater to a different demographic. And when you look at news and the factual entertainment are the only two which cater to, the educative part of the learning curve. In that sense, news is a 24-hour cycle, and it's got a very short shelf life, and it's primarily live. So it doesn't dwell too much upon the details and goes inside much as we would want to, because there is a sheer plethora of news in India. I mean, with a country as big, despite having 200 news channels, it still seems like there could be many more for each district literally, right? So you don't get that much amount of bandwidth, whether in terms of financials or whether in terms of manpower, to just spend and make an immersive story about something. Where factual entertainment comes in, it is just, on the periphery of the news. So it takes a story from there and converts into a long form, converts into a storytelling and narrative. And this is why, perhaps, these kinds of genres are the best for that. Though some of these things will also find its way on news channels, but they are primarily, less of what I would call it, either the true blue news, and on the other hand, absolute entertainment. So this is somewhere right in between, which is factual entertainment. And this is a genre, if you look at globally, among the top 10 channels in the US is the factual entertainment channels. Unfortunately, in India, it's still a mass entertainment-driven category, right? It has far less of factual entertainment as a channel share overall. And that also is because of the fact that, though there have been competitors or, players like us who've been in this genre for a long while, but the amount of investments that it takes to make a 24-hour cycle with this thing is just, you know, a lot of money which currently the business models in India are not able to support and fund. As a consequence, you might see we were the first ones in the genre to actually come out with local productions with series. So we did the OMG Mera India, where in season 5 we ended up doing. We are doing the one-offs that we are doing, including India 8. It does take a lot of hard work to get these things going, and the business model right now isn't, you know, fully in place to make sure that we are able to do a 24-hour channel only of local content. And that, if that happens, would actually change the entire way the nation watches television.
So there are several stories also, Avinash, in this particular film that have been narrated. What story, according to you, is a story that should be told in today's scenario, in today's context?
I think it's very impossible actually to choose one. You know, on one end, because the storylines have been beautifully crafted. I've had full confidence to the entire team that has really worked tirelessly on it. It's a sliver of the first-time voter. It's a sliver of the old lady. It's a sliver of the geographic dispersion. It is the sliver of the you know, the gender differences. So all of them have been beautifully captured on how this exercise is seen in the eyes of, you know, different segments. So it's literally impossible to really, you know, choose any one single particular one.
Okay. Aparna, from you, I would like to know, you know, as I kept on saying again and again, the kind of time and effort that went behind conducting the research to get those figures, to get those stories must be, you know, like it looks like a couple of months of hard work. Tell us the involvement of Election Commission. How did they help you get the data? How did they help you, you know, probably reach, let's say, Rihanna or Shari Devis of the world?
Well, it's a bit of our research, it's a bit of help from them. Of course, they gave us access to come and shoot at various places, polling stations, you know, with the district magistrates, and of course we interviewed the Chief Election Commissioner. But beyond that, it's a lot of our research also, through networks, through newspaper articles, through, let's say, stringers, tapping into our network, which boasts of many news channels. So a lot of that sort of helped us find some of these characters as well. Of course, there was easily about 3 months of research that our production partners put in to actually find, let's say, somebody like Rihanna. So it's a bit of everything actually.
So there is a very interesting question from Malay, who's from Pune. He says, how hasn't India won the Guinness Book yet for the elections?
I think you have to apply for it, right?
That's an interesting thought. I think that's some food for thought for the Election Commission of India.
Okay guys, if you have more questions, then do write to us in the comment section on the Facebook page of History TV 18. There is one question that I have. Avinash, your key takeaway and learning from this particular documentary you already mentioned. Tell us, you know, last year we had a film like Newton, which narrated the story of one government servant's efforts to make election happen in a very difficult area. Now this film also talks about the efforts that goes behind, you know, trekking up several kilometers and carrying like, you know, organizing a polling station, conducting the election there. Why do you think such stories need to be told in today's environment, in today's mahal?
See, it's like, you know, if you see even mainstream cinema, we would call such things mainstream, though I would refer to the mainstream being, you've seen movies like Poetic Prem Katha, you've seen, you know, like you talk about Newton, you talk about all of these kinds of things, because effectively, you know, with the advent of, you know, high quality content now getting developed more and more in India, and I don't mean to say that earlier there wasn't, it's just the sheer inclusion of OTT platforms in India which have lifted the benchmarks of content to some extent, because the mass GC content is still measured by the people meter system in India, which still, you know, it's a premium on massiness. And massiness is effectively, it means just that. It's very mass, it's an assembly line factory, and barring maybe reality shows, there isn't really much on an expense schedule if you were to look at it. But the moment the business model evolved to the fact that people actually pay for the content directly, which is by subscription to online OTT services, the quality of the content and the investments in the content have increased manifold. As a consequence, there are now audiences for such kind of storytelling, right? And effectively, wherever there is a scope for a storytelling and wherever there is a business model activity to support it, more and more content gets produced in that particular genre. Which is what is reflective, when multiplexes have come in, you are seeing such attempts like Newton happen. If it was just the single screen theaters, chances are you might still be with the #1 series of popular film stars of yesteryears.
So we also have, along with the audience joining us on Facebook Live, we have live audience right here with us. I'm sure since you guys have seen the film right now, you would be having a lot of questions about it. You can ask those questions right away. Does anyone have a question from the audience?
They're still in awe of the film.
There's a guy here.
Hi, my name is Jigar. My question is to one, and then another one for questions. My question is, out of the n number of stories that you would have come across in terms of people or the commission trying to reach out to as many number of people as possible, why did you have to choose this one story first? And what were the other stories that you received, which you are also wanting to show in the series? So that's one question to you. And second, my question to you, Avinash, is, did you have, was it a conscious decision to kind of have this as a documentary and not a docu-series? Because there are so many inspiring stories and then you just kind of see one, and there are many more that can be told as well.
Sorry, I just need a clarification. Which story are you speaking about?
Alright, so
Generally the ones that...
Generally, the number of stories that you would have come across, and then you chose to show one from Himachal largely, and then there's another one from China. But what were the other stories that you also came across?
Well, for us, what worked for the Himachal story was just this lady's spirit. She's 108, she's been a regular voter. So it's a very compelling story and something that when we sort of first heard of or read about, we wanted to do it. So it was a very instinctive sort of decision to do this story. Vis-a-vis, let's say, Rihanna's story in Delhi, again something that we wanted to tell. We wanted to tell that story. Also because the election commission's actually gone out there this time and they've encouraged more and more people from the third gender community to actually register to vote. So a lot of these stories really worked for us. I'm pretty sure there were other stories to tell, but these are the ones that we thought, we should sort of feature.
My question, during the research, did you have other stories also in hand where you had to choose from and then come to conclusion with these two?
Well, none that were perhaps as compelling as these, so it was sort of an easy choice.
Sribi, answering the second part of your question, the fact of the matter is that when you have 60 crore people voting for something, there are innumerable stories. There are absolutely innumerable stories, and in fact, among your friends and family, I'm sure there will be some story or the other related to these aspects. The choices that we end up making are finally, what we think, given the time frame, given the financial constraints, given the time constraints, what is the best story that we can, get out. And I think that plays a vital role in the definition of why we decided it to be a one-off rather than a series. Because the honest truth is that, you could have as many stories inside it as you would want, but the sheer size, when you look at it from a logistical point of view, the storytelling, different geographies, different time frames, different things happening, it just makes the product that much more expensive to produce. And in the absence of a very strong, robust business model behind each one of them, it's just, when I said that some stories just need to be told, this is just an attempt to make sure that that happens. And we are hoping that if this sets the precedent, then many more such stories will be told in the future, and that's what effectively what we are hoping.
Thank you.
I have 2 more questions right here.
Yeah. Hello ma'am, hello sir. This is Harsh Doshi here. And first of all, it's very amazing. I was rolling down with tears, with pride and everything, which was really amazing. And many a times as an Indian we say, kuch nahi hota India mein. But then if this reaches masses, then it is going to make every individual feel pride about being Indian. And especially when I saw the Shari Devi thing, which was really amazing, inspiring, motivating, and a lot. So here we were focusing on voters, okay. But if we come up with I saw a small segment where the person who climbs up and says I have my contribution in Shari Devi's thing, okay. So why can't we come up with people who are into the election commission, okay, who are actually going there? If we come out with documentary on them, so we can really get the insights, how they are working hard. Well, we always say कि उनको कुछ काम नहीं है. Like how ma'am said, she had to wait like 1 hour in the line in the queue, and we say वो लोग सिर्फ बैठ के वो लोग तो मजे कर रहे हैं. But if we come up with such thing, it might change people's perspective towards how the political parties are working, how the election commissions are working. So have you thought something like that about it?
It's an extremely valid thought, and if you look at it, it's not just the election commission. You see any of our civil services, even the traffic policeman on the beach, even the cop that you see, or even the person who drives the bus, or the person who drives the, who runs the train for us, even locals here. I mean, each have an amazing story, of determination of grit, and they are not really among the highest paid, for the amount of work that they do and the hardships that they face. It's the only reflection is, I mean, I wish we could do hundreds of these kinds of stories. The problem finally lies down in, each story is so compelling and it's a very hard choice finally to what to make. That what you end up doing is you take those stories that you think have the maximum resonance. Resonance in the sense like, this is something which is topical, right? Because the elections have just got finished. It's an exercise that has touched 60 crore people directly because they have gone ahead and voted. Not to say that 130 other crores who have, known about it and participated in that sense. The other story that we've taken, like what we're giving an example, is we've done the surgical strikes, right? And that again is a story which touches all 130 million people in India, right? So it just gives you that much amount of strength, or the story travels across. So when we make these choices, and when we can only do these, let's say 4 or 5 times in a year, then we really got to pick that one which really we think can fulfill a lot of these things, like what you said. It instills a sense of pride about this thing, and it might instill that if a 108-year-old lady could go and vote, why shouldn't I, right? So all of these things, like even the surgical strike, is supposed to instill that feeling that you could actually also create history, right? So those are the choices that you make. I mean, it's a very tough choice, and the thought process, our mind, every time we sit down, in a programming discussion to create more content. But unfortunately, the realities of business are that we got to focus on what we do best and showcase it very well. Because if you do half a job of it, then the impact is not as much. And with this film, we're intending, or we're hoping that it travels outside of the country, not just to the all the corners of the country, but outside. Because this is a story that the whole world needs to stand up and take notice. I mean, the amount of hard work that all the people, 1.4 crore people who are engaged in this exercise, end up doing. But yeah, the thought always crosses our mind.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. One more question, and then I have one question, and then we'll take a couple of questions from the guest.
My name is Vaishna, and my question is are you?
We have it in Hindi, we have it in Tamil, we have it in Telugu. These are the languages that it is already available in. And predominantly, if you were to see, it covers a large part of the population of India, and with the exception of probably Kannada. I think broadly speaking it does cover. I mean, it's largely understood. So we could look at it in multiple languages, but yeah.
Thank you.
and the episode also will be shown on YouTube and will be telecast on History TV 18 as well, and also on YouTube on all 3 languages. So, since nobody has asked this question, and not even on Facebook Live, in fact, I have to address the elephant in the room. Why did you decide to stay clear of politics in this particular film? No, go on.
Well, for me, you see so much of it on news channels, right? Everybody knows what's happening with the several political parties. We wanted to tell the stories that people don't know about. For the politics, I mean, you watch the news channel.
Thank you, Aparna. So she's probably in the best position to answer that because I'm in a competitive position. I run 20 news channels. How on earth can I say something like that?
Okay, we have Komal from Cuttack on Facebook Live asking us, is there any part of the country where the election officials are not able to conduct the elections?
Well, though strictly speaking, it's a question for them, but if I was to attempt it on their behalf, I mean, the fact is that even when they have to make the choices of where all to go and everything else, they do make those tough choices, but they do not shirk away from, the daunting task ahead, like the 20-kilometer trek that we have talked about. So I wouldn't think that there are any pockets which are left untouched. Though yes, there will be even more remote, some stories like this. This is at least where our crew went and we covered it. But I'm sure there are many, many more, places which are far tougher to reach and with far lesser number of people voting there. But yes, the Election Commission does reach there.
So I have one more question which was on top of my mind as well, and in fact Raj from Patna has asked this on Facebook Live. How did you really arrive upon the idea to make a show about India's elections? Like, how did the idea come to you? Like, why of everything in terms of content did you think of telling the story of the elections?
Well, for one, it's history's biggest election. There hasn't been anything bigger than this across the world. And it's something that needed to be covered. Stories of people who organized it is something we wanted to do. So it was that easy. And it's about, our channel's a lot about people, ordinary people, doing extraordinary things, making history every day, that kind of thing. So. It was a very sort of,
Let me let you in on a small secret. That when you asked me about the green lighting the fact of the matter is that this particular show probably got discussed the least. I think the discussion or the decision got taken over a little via WhatsApp from our head of content, Arun Thapar, sending it to me, what do you think of this idea? I said, it's a fantastic idea, let's roll with it. Right? And that's how, the green lighting happened. Because, full compliments to the team for coming out with the thought, because it's topical, it is the biggest thing that has happened, and it has an attempt to showcase our country, which is known for many incredible things, but if anything is incredible in India, then this is what it is.
And I must admit that, in fact, in our office, I sit on a floor which is not the floor of History TV 18, and I saw like a couple of these teasers played on the TV, and it really made me stop and look at the television at that point in time. And our office is full of TVs everywhere. Of course, it's a TV channel. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on this Facebook Live. Thanks all. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed this film made on the world's biggest elections.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
You can have the snacks kept right behind. Thank you so much.